So there was recently a program that was just announced that's potentially going to send out about $1,800 checks next year sometime to about 60 something million people. If you haven't heard about that yet, then this is definitely the video for you. If you have heard about that, then I pretty much just want to give my own personal insight and talk a little bit about this. The big idea is that it was recently just announced, and by just announced we mean this morning if you are watching this on, well, the film date, but I'll probably release it tomorrow. But the big idea is that if you're watching this anytime around release date, then this is absolutely going to be relevant until next year, because this is something that's going to be expected to start in January of 2023. What is this exactly? It's going to be everything related to the Social Security situation. The big idea is that in today's update is that there was recently just announced that there's going to be a brand new boost now that's going to apply to anyone who happens to be a Social Security recipient, which is basically about over 60 million people inside of our country, and even more likely to join in the coming years. That even if you are not necessarily someone that's on Social Security, I still do think it might be relevant to hear through and kind of understand what's happening, because everything that's going on now is potentially also going to impact inflation, whether or not it's going to drive it even further, how our economy is going to look, and this is something that regardless of whether you are or are not on Social Security is going to be relatively relevant. So of course, we are going to start to talk about everything, but as always, real fast before we begin, because we are still sharing some relatively bright news, at least I think so, that, you know, we're talking about people now getting more money. Remember to smash the like button if you guys hopefully enjoy stuff like that, or you guys can watch to the end to decide. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell as we get more information about whether this is Social Security or other finance topics or other ways to put money in our pockets. If that is something you care about, then maybe consider subscribing. Of course, again, you guys can decide. And as always, feel free to comment maybe any questions, maybe personal thoughts about what you think about this current program and situation. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So the new breaking news information that was just announced as of the week, if you're watching this on the week of release, is that Social Security recipients are now expected to receive a boost next year of about 8.7%. So this is actually very massive breaking news, and we're going to talk about why this applies to everyone else in a little bit, even if you're not a Social Security recipient. But the big idea is that every single year they raise Social Security payments by a certain amount. It's also called COLA, so COLA, cost of living adjustment, in order to try to keep up with inflation. There's been a lot of controversy about the formula that they use to kind of calculate this, but nonetheless is that this is relatively breaking news, because this is a brand new record of how much they've raised Social Security by in the last 40 years. Last year specifically, it went up by about 5.8%, or 5.9%, correction, 5.9%, where it made it so that the average person on Social Security was able to receive about $1,681 per person. So essentially about $1,700 per person. But now, because they're boosting it up by 8.7%, it means that the average person now on Social Security is going to receive about $1,827. So essentially right around $1,800, give or take. So hopefully this kind of clarifies what this $1,800 check that many millions of people are going to be receiving next year is going to be about. So really huge congrats, and again, this is really great news, because it means that even more money is starting to come soon. And even more specifically beyond that is that the specific amount that they're potentially going to raise it by per every single person is going to be about $100. I wish it was 1,000, but $140, which is basically where you bring up to the dollar amount of $1,800. So what this really means is that if you are currently on Social Security, the average person that's on Social Security is going to now receive a boost of about $140, which means that the total amount of money that they're going to receive is going to be, as mentioned, around $1,800 next year in terms of checks. The biggest difference, I will say, and this kind of goes on to maybe another thing that we're going to talk about, which is about the inflation impact, is that while this is something that's meant to stimulate the economy, the biggest focus is that it's not necessarily meant to just stimulate the economy, but it's actually also a lot more made to actually for survival. So some people are even calling this a survival check, actually, more than a stimulus check. But of course, a lot of these names people have just been using interchangeably, but at least objectively speaking, we can talk about the dollar amount, how much people are receiving, and what this basically means. All of these payments, they're expected to start the beginning of next year, so specifically January 2023, and it's all going to be an automatic procedure. So if you are someone that qualifies, with the assumption that they have your information, because if you're not on Social Security but you are able to get on Social Security, then you probably just have to make sure they have your information. But assuming that you are currently on Social Security, then beyond this is that you don't have to do anything. The really great news is that it's going to be an automatic procedure where they're going to adjust it and then deliver it into your bank account, exactly like they've been basically doing it for the history of Social Security, and now to our pockets or anyone that's potentially going to benefit from this particular situation. And again, maybe for just some general background effort, is that the last time that they experienced a raise of this high was by about 11.2%. And this didn't even happen until probably about 1981. So we're talking about 40 years. It was 40 years until they raised it by this amount. So this is basically a brand new 40-year record, which is again mentioning why this is very historical and relatively breaking news. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about why or how this is going to impact every single person and the significance about this right now. So the big idea is that even if you don't happen to be a Social Security recipient, the biggest reason why this is going to matter is that it's going to help the economy in a lot of ways. One of the most common questions is about whether or not this is going to make inflation worse, because again, you might be able to logic out, well, if people are getting more money, it means that they're going to spend more, which means that the economy will be stimulated, but it also means that the costs are also going to go up as well. The really great news about this is that it's actually not necessarily expected to increase inflation. Yes, it is true that there's going to be about several million, tens of millions of people that are now going to be able to receive more money in their pockets. But the biggest difference between this and traditional stimulus checks is that what's really nice about this is that it's going to be a lot more focused to Social Security recipients. And most people that receive Social Security aren't really particularly wealthy. We'll just put it at that. I mean, objectively speaking, and it's actually because of that particular reason, this is actually going to potentially benefit a lot of different people, because the big idea is that obviously people on Social Security are going to be able to raise up and have more money. But what this also means is that it means that the money is going to go out to people that particularly need it as a survival check, which means a lot of them are expected to basically take that money and use it for actual necessities, not for trying to spend it on extravagant vacations or fun consumer goods like what some again, we're not saying, I know most people here, went through a lot of difficulties, including me at that time period. But it's very fair to say that back with stimulus checks, there were probably a lot of people that took their stimulus check and spent it on something that was relatively enjoyable, extravagant, or fun, which is still very important. We talk a lot on this channel about why it's important to find balance about how we spend our money, but of course that's a topic for another day. But the big idea is that by doing what they're doing, it means that the people that really particularly need that money are able to get it, which means that they're now able to spend it on necessities to help basically improve the economy even further. But at the same time, it also means that they're not going to spend it, at least they're not as likely to spend it extravagantly, which means that it's going to still be able to control the inflation situation, which is a reason why, as just mentioned, is some people are calling it a stimulus check because that's the traditional name, but other people are saying that maybe this is not really even a true stimulus check, or maybe it's a controversial stimulus check in the sense that it's much more of a survival check for people that particularly need that money to be able to get that money and be able to sustain. And I think that's the really, really, really great news, to be able to at least finally share something bright and positive to some people out there. Now, beyond this, where do we go is that the other further great news is that there are definitely a lot of politicians like Bernie Sanders, several people in Congress, that are now also trying to come out with their own separate additional Social Security plan in order to raise it even further or do other kinds of things. What this also means is that it also proves why it's possible to do stimulus checks without actually having to influence inflation if those stimulus checks are actually very, very targeted, and if they don't print more money but redirect existing money, it's still very, very possible to achieve the best of both worlds. But of course, what do they end up doing from here? We basically just have to see going forward in the coming months, and of course in one of the future episodes of The Kevin Show. So with that being said, that's pretty much what I really just wanted to cover in today's video. So if you guys found that insightful and haven't done so, hopefully remember to smash the like button if you guys haven't done. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell, and as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts about this situation. It's really always great to hear from you guys, even simple hellos. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.